The path curved around a small hill, and that's when he saw her. A figure sat alone in the middle of a field of wildflowers, knees drawn to chest, arms wrapped around legs, as if trying to hold herself together. From a distance, she looked like a statue, motionless, lifeless, just another element of the landscape. Kael's first instinct was to continue walking. People had their own problems, their own demons. It wasn't his place to interfere, but something made him stop. Perhaps it was the way her shoulders trembled almost imperceptibly. Perhaps it was how small she looked, lost in that vast field of gold and purple. Or perhaps it was simply that voice inside him, the one that had awakened when Elena fell into his life. The one that had grown stronger when he saved the Ashford family, telling him that some things couldn't be ignored. He left the path and began walking toward her. The girl didn't notice his approach. She was too lost in whatever darkness consumed her thoughts. Only when his shadow fell across her did she look up, and Kael saw her face for the first time. Young, perhaps 19 or 20 years old. Brown hair that fell in tangled waves around a face marked by dried tears. Eyes that were green like spring leaves, but carried the weight of 1,000 winters. And in those eyes, something that made Kael's chest tighten. Emptiness. Complete and absolute emptiness. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'll leave. I know I shouldn't be here. I'll go." She began to rise, but Kael raised a hand. "The field belongs to no one. You can stay." The girl froze, clearly not expecting that response. She looked at him with suspicion, as if waiting for the catch, the insult, the dismissal. You're not going to tell me to leave?" "Why would I?" "Because everyone does." The words came out with a bitterness that seemed too old for someone so young. "I'm always in the way, always where I shouldn't be, always bothering someone." Kael studied her for a long moment. There was something familiar in that pain, that absolute certainty of being worthless. He had seen it before, in his own reflection, years ago. Without asking permission, he sat down on the grass a few meters away from her, close enough to talk, far enough not to threaten. "My name is Kael." The girl looked at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. "Why are you telling me your name?" "Because that's how people begin conversations. People don't have conversations with me." She said it as a simple fact, devoid of self-pity, just reality as she knew it. "People tell me what to do, or tell me I did something wrong, or tell me to disappear. They don't sit down in fields to talk. I'm not people." Kael picked up a wildflower and twirled it between his fingers. "I'm someone who saw a girl crying alone and decided that maybe she shouldn't be alone." The silence that followed was long and heavy. The girl stared at him, searching for something: deceit, mockery, superior motives. Finding none, she seemed to deflate, all her defenses crumbling at once. "Elara," she whispered. "My name is Elara." "Elara," Kael repeated, tasting the name. "Why are you crying alone in a field, Elara?" She laughed, but it was a broken sound, devoid of any joy. "Because there's nowhere else for me to cry." She hugged her knees again. "At home, my mother tells me to stop being dramatic. My father doesn't even look at me. My brothers treat me like I'm invisible unless they need someone to blame." Her voice cracked. "In the village, people whisper when I pass. The girl who's not good enough. The girl who can't do anything right. The girl who should have been born a boy." Kael felt anger begin to simmer in his chest. Not the explosive rage that drove him to action, but a slow, burning fury against a world that could break someone so completely. "And in the city?" he asked quietly. "Worse." Elara's eyes glazed over with painful memories. "I went there once, looking for work, looking for, I don't know, a new beginning, a place where no one knew me." She shook her head. "They laughed at my clothes, at the way I spoke, at everything. One merchant told me I was worth less than the dirt on his boots. And the worst part is," her voice broke completely, "the worst part is I believed him." Tears began to fall again, silent and steady. "I'm tired," she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "So tired of being nothing, of feeling like a mistake that the world is forced to tolerate. I came to this field because..." She stopped, swallowing hard. "Because what?" Elara didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Kael understood. He had seen that look before, the look of someone who had given up. "Elara," His voice was firm but gentle. "Look at me." She lifted her eyes, and for a moment, the emptiness wavered. "I'm going to tell you something that someone should have told you a long time ago." Kael held her gaze. "You are not nothing. You are not a mistake. And the people who made you feel that way are wrong. Every single one of them. You don't know me," she whispered. "You don't know what I've done, what I haven't done, all the ways I've failed. I know what I see." "And what do you see?" The question was challenging, almost defiant, as if she expected him to finally reveal the cruelty she was waiting for. Kael was silent for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "I see a girl who, despite being treated like nothing her entire life, still had the strength to cry. Do you know what that means? It means you still feel. It means the world hasn't managed to kill what's inside you even though it tried." Elara's lips trembled. "I also see someone who apologized before I even spoke," he continued, "who offered to leave a field that belongs to no one because she's been conditioned to believe she has no right to occupy space. Do you know what that tells me? That you care about others, that even in your pain, your first instinct is not to bother anyone." "That's not special," Elara said, but her voice wavered. That's just being pathetic." "No, that's being kind. And in a world full of cruel people, kindness is the rarest thing that exists." The tears were flowing freely now, but something had changed in Elara's expression. The emptiness was still there, but alongside it, there was something else. A flicker of something almost forgotten. "Hope. Why are you saying these things?" she asked, her voice small. "You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me. Because someone once helped me when I was lost," Kael said, his eyes distant for a moment. "And because I learned that sometimes, the most important thing we can do is see the value in someone who has forgotten their own." The sun moved across the sky as they talked. What began as careful exchanges slowly transformed into something deeper. Elara spoke of her childhood, of a mother who had wanted a son and never forgave her for being born a girl, of a father who worked the fields from dawn to dusk and had no energy left for a daughter who wasn't useful, of brothers who inherited their parents' indifference and turned it into something crueler. She spoke of the village of whispers that followed her like shadows, of the butcher who always gave her the worst cuts, of the baker who charged her more than others because he knew she wouldn't complain, of the children who threw stones and called her names she still heard in her nightmares. She spoke of dreams she had abandoned, of wanting to learn to read, of wanting to see the ocean, of wanting to find somewhere she belonged. Dreams that had been crushed so many times that she had stopped dreaming altogether. And Kael listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He simply listened, because he understood that sometimes being heard was the most powerful gift someone could receive. When she finally fell silent, exhausted from the weight of words she had carried alone for years, Kael spoke. "Do you want to know what I see now?" After hearing all of that, Elara braced herself, certain that now, finally, he would see what everyone else saw. "I see someone strong." She laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. "Strong? I'm the weakest person I know." "No. Weak people break. They become cruel because they were treated cruelly. They pass their pain to others because carrying it alone is too hard." Kael leaned forward slightly. "You didn't break. You didn't become cruel. Despite everything, the neglect, the mockery, the constant message that you were worthless, you remained kind. Do you have any idea how much strength that requires?" Elara shook her head, unable to speak. "The people who hurt you, they're the weak ones. It takes no strength to be cruel to someone who can't fight back. But to receive cruelty and respond with kindness, to be treated like nothing and still apologize for existing, that's not weakness, Elara. That's a kind of strength most people will never understand." Something inside Elara cracked. Not the destructive crack of breaking, but the necessary crack of walls coming down. She began to sob deep, wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. Kael didn't try to stop her. He knew these tears were different from the ones before. These were the tears of someone beginning to release years of accumulated pain. When the sobs finally subsided, Elara looked at him with red, swollen eyes. "I don't know how to be anything else," she admitted. "I don't know how to see myself the way you describe. I've spent so long believing I was nothing that I don't remember how to believe anything else." "Then let me show you." The offer hung in the air between them. What do you mean? Kael stood and extended his hand toward her. I live in a cabin in the forest. It's not much, but it's peaceful. You can stay there while you figure out your next steps. No expectations, no conditions, just a safe place to rest and remember who you are. Elara stared at his hand as if it were a foreign object. Why would you do that? You don't know me. I could be anyone. I could be dangerous. Despite himself, Kael smiled. You apologized for sitting in an empty field. I don't think you're dangerous, but your life. I would be intruding, bothering you. I always bother people. You would be keeping me company, Kael corrected. And I'm starting to realize that maybe I've been alone for too long. Elara looked at his hand, then at his face, then back at his hand. The internal battle was visible, years of conditioning telling her she didn't deserve kindness warring against a desperate need to believe that maybe, just maybe, she did. Slowly, trembling, she reached out and took his hand. Kael pulled her to her feet. Come, it's a long walk, and the sun will set soon. The journey to the cabin was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Elara walked beside Kael, her eyes taking in the forest with a mix of wonder and apprehension. She had never been this far from the village before. The world beyond her small, cruel existence was bigger than she had imagined. It's beautiful, she murmured as they passed through a grove of ancient oaks, their leaves turning gold and red in the autumn light. It is, Kael agreed. I spent years not seeing it, too focused on my own pain to notice anything else. Elara glanced at him. You were in pain? I lost my sister when I was young, taken by men who sold people like livestock. Kael's voice was steady, but Elara could hear the old wound beneath the words. For years, I blamed myself. I thought that if I had been stronger, faster, better, I could have saved her. Did you find her? No, but I found a way to live with the loss. And I found that helping others gave meaning to the survival I once resented. They walked in silence for a while longer before Elara spoke again. I never had anyone to lose, she said quietly. Is that worse? Having no one who would notice if you disappeared? Kael stopped walking and turned to face her. Elara, I would notice. The words were simple, but they struck her with the force of a physical blow. She stared at him, searching for the lie, the manipulation, the hidden cruelty. There was none. We've known each other for a few hours, she whispered. Sometimes a few hours is enough to see someone's worth. Elara felt tears threatening again, but she forced them back. She had cried enough for one day. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Kael nodded and resumed walking. The cabin appeared as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Small but sturdy, with smoke already rising from the chimney, Kael had banked the fire before leaving that morning. It's not much, he said as they approached. It's beautiful, Elara breathed. And she meant it. After a lifetime of feeling unwelcome in her own home, the simple cabin in the woods felt like a palace. Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly cozy. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. There was a bed in one corner, a table with 2 chairs, and shelves lined with dried herbs and supplies. And on one shelf, a small wooden flower. Elara walked toward it, drawn by its simple beauty. What's this? A gift, Kael said, his voice soft. From a little girl I helped a few months ago. She told me to keep it so I wouldn't be so alone. Elara touched the flower gently. Did it work? I'm beginning to think it did. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. You can have the bed, he said, breaking the moment. I'll sleep by the fire. Tomorrow, we can talk about what comes next. What comes next? Whatever you want. Kael began preparing a simple meal. You can stay here as long as you need, or I can help you find somewhere else, if you prefer. The choice is yours. Choice. The word felt foreign to Elara. When had anyone ever given her a choice? I don't know what I want, she admitted. I don't know how to want things anymore. Then we start there. Kael set a bowl of soup on the table and gestured for her to sit. We start by remembering how to want. Days turned into weeks. At first, Elara was a ghost in the cabin, silent, apologetic, constantly trying to make herself small and invisible. Every time Kael spoke to her, she flinched as if expecting criticism. Every time he gave her food, She thanked him so profusely that it broke his heart. But slowly, gradually, something began to change. It started with small things. Alara discovered she loved tending the garden. She had a natural gift for growing things, for coaxing life from soil and seeds. The first time she successfully grew a tomato, she stared at it with such wonder that Kael had to look away to hide his emotion. "I made this," she whispered, holding the small red fruit like a treasure. "I actually made something." "You did," Kael confirmed. "You created life where there was none." "That's not nothing, Alara. That's everything." She began to smile more. Small smiles at first, hesitant and quickly hidden. But as the weeks passed, they grew stronger, more frequent, more genuine. Kael taught her to read. They sat by the fire each night, working through simple books he had collected over the years. Alara was a quick learner, her mind sharp and hungry for knowledge that had been denied her. "I never thought I could do this," she said one night, successfully reading an entire page without help. "My mother always said I was too stupid to learn." "Your mother was wrong," Kael said firmly. "About everything." And slowly Lara began to believe it. She learned to defend herself too. Kael taught her the basics of using a knife, of reading terrain, of moving through the forest without being seen. Not because he expected her to fight, but because he wanted her to know she could. "You have power," he told her after she successfully hit a target for the first time. "You always had it. You just didn't know." The girl who had arrived broken and empty was transforming into something new. Not through grand gestures or dramatic moments, but through countless small ones. Through meals shared in comfortable silence. Through conversations by firelight. Through the simple, revolutionary act of being treated with respect. One evening, as autumn gave way to the first whispers of winter, Alara found Kael sitting outside the cabin, staring at the stars. She sat beside him without asking permission. She had stopped asking permission weeks ago. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Always. When you found me in that field, I was going to end it." The words came out steady, though they cost her everything to say. "I had decided that there was nothing left worth staying for, that the world would be better without me." Kael didn't respond, but his jaw tightened. "I want you to know that you saved my life that day, not just by talking to me, but by seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." She turned to look at him, her green eyes bright with tears that didn't fall. "You gave me a reason to stay. You gave me a future I didn't think I could have." Kael was silent for a long moment. "I saw what was always there," he finally said. "A kind heart, a strong spirit, a person worthy of love and respect. You were always those things, Alara. I just reminded you." "No," she shook her head. "You didn't remind me. You showed me for the first time, and I will never forget that." They sat in silence, watching the stars well overhead. "What will you do now?" Kael asked eventually. "Winter is coming. You could stay here, or I could help you find somewhere else. Somewhere with more people, more opportunities." Alara considered the question seriously. "I'd like to stay," she said finally, "if you'll have me. Not because I have nowhere else to go, but because this feels like home. The first real home I've ever had." Kael looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something vulnerable in his expression. "I'd like that too." Alara smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "Then I'll stay." Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, indifferent to the small miracle happening below. Two broken people had found each other in a field of wildflowers, and in doing so, had discovered something neither expected. A reason to keep going, a place to belong, a home.